housekeeping, tell y'all about some upcoming virtual events. So next Tuesday at 5 o'clock, we have Willie Vlotten in conversation with Bill Boyle, who is a local author in Oxford. He's a fantastic kind of noir writer. But they'll be in conversation for Willie's latest book, Night Always Comes. And I will put a link on for you to be able to learn more about that. Then on April 26th, we have kind of a big event. It's an exclusive pre-publication virtual lunch with John Grisham in conversation with Wright Thompson in support of John's new book, Sully. You can attend by pre-ordering a signed first edition of Sully from Square Books, and we will send you that link and y'all can have lunch with us. And then finally, Mother's Day is coming up. It's my assistant, Carla. And I think a great gift, in addition to Sunflower Sisters, would be a signed first edition of Elizabeth High School's Come On Over. You can even kind of up the stakes a little bit and buy a ticket to our exclusive virtual book launch with Elizabeth. It'll be live from her kitchen, and you can also support St. Jude's Children's Hospital by buying a ticket to that. I'll put links in the chat. But enough about them. Let's move on to the main event. As I said earlier, we are joined this evening together with Martha Hall Kelly in support of Sunflower Sisters, her wonderful new book, and Lisa Wingate has agreed to join us in conversation. A little bit more about Martha. She's a New York Times bestselling author of 3 books, her debut novel, international blockbuster Lilac Girls, and the prequels, Lost Roses and Sunflower Sisters. Never an enthusiastic history student in school, Martha developed a passion for when she discovered the long buried story of how Caroline Faraday, a New York socialite and philanthropist, who championed the cause of a group of Polish women nicknamed the Rabbits and experimented upon by Nazi doctors at the all-female Ravensbrück concentration camp. Martha is also a former copywriter and lives on a hay farm in Litchfield County, Connecticut, with her husband, Michael, their practically human dog, Oliver, 2 beavers, and several muskrats. She has journalism degrees from Syracuse and Northwestern universities, and her books have been published in 49 languages. Her latest novel, Sunflower Sisters, the story of Caroline Faraday's great aunt's fight to become a nurse during the Civil War and the family's fight against slavery, was described by Kirkus Reviews as having, quote, historical verisimilitude, worthy of a Ken Burns documentary, but oh so much more lurid. And once she looked up the actual definition of lurid, was very happy. She is currently working on 2 new books, a Cold War novel set in the 1950s and a super scary contemporary thriller set in her own house, which makes it very hard for her to sleep some nights. Whew, you're busy. Lisa Wingate is a former journalist and inspirational speaker and the author of over 30 books, including New York Times bestsellers, The Book of Lost Friends and Before We Were Yours. Her work has won or been nominated for many awards, including the Pat Conroy Southern Book Prize, the Oklahoma Book Award, the Carroll Award, the Christie Award, and the RT Reviewer's Choice Award. She lives with her husband in North Texas. Phew, very accomplished ladies. But before I hand it off to y'all, we have what's been called a sizzle reel in support of Sunflower Sisters. So I'm going to play that now. And so y'all just sit back and relax, and please submit any questions you might have for them in the Q&A. All right, let's do this. Ooh. Bear with me. All right, there we go.
Hi everybody, Martha Hall Kelly here. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about my new novel, Sunflower Sisters. I'll miss going out on book tour this year, but at least I can still come to you from my home and connect with readers around the world. You may be familiar with my first 2 books about the Woolsey Faraday family, Lilac Girls and Lost Roses. I thought I'd share a bit about the research and historical inspiration behind those novels and how they paved the way for Sunflower Sisters. I first learned of a fascinating woman named Caroline Faraday in 1999 when I read an article in Victorian magazine about her famous gardens. The article showed photos of Caroline's home in Connecticut, now known as the Bellamy Faraday House, and photos of her renowned garden, filled with roses and lilacs. I love lilacs and really wanted to visit, but with 3 young children, I had little time to spare. But one Mother's Day, my husband Michael urged me to go, and I visited the estate, unaware that the trip would lead to my first novel. I was the only visitor on the tour of the lovely old home that spring day. During the tour, I came upon Caroline's desk, and a photograph of a group of young women caught my eye. The guide referred to them as the Rabbits and told me that Caroline took up the cause of these young Polish girls after they were experimented upon by the Nazis at Ravensbrück concentration camp. She brought them to America for rehabilitation, and once I heard their story, I was fascinated and set out to learn everything I could about them. My goal was to write a fictionalized account of actual events and to perhaps breathe new life into a story that seemed to me had fallen from public view. I started my research at the Bellamy Faraday House and then traveled to Paris, where I found another archive of Caroline's letters to immerse myself in. In Poland, I was lucky enough to interview a Ravensbrück survivor and took the train to Germany to see the concentration camp. That's a day I'll never forget. While writing and researching Lilac Girls, I came to love Caroline Faraday's mother, Eliza Woolsey Mitchell. The daughter of one of the famous Woolsey women of New York City, known for being staunch abolitionists and philanthropists, Eliza ended up devoting her time to the cause of white Russian emigres, former aristocrats in Russia who lost everything when the Bolsheviks seized power from the Tsar in 1918. When the emigres arrived in New York City, many of them destitute and traumatized, Eliza helped the women find work and a place to live. She even opened her own apartment and Southampton cottage to them. I began to embark on a new journey that inspired the story of Lost Roses. I created a wall with the other characters I wanted to add, Eliza's aristocratic Russian friend Sophia and a Russian peasant girl, Marinka. To bring the story alive for readers, I traveled to Russia and explored everything from the Tsar's palaces to rustic villages. I visited Long Island, New York, and peeked past the privacy hedges of Southampton's Gin Lane into the famous shingle-style cottages and estates. And in France, I discovered a lovely, little-known Russian part of Paris. But the place I drew the most inspiration from was again the Bellamy Faraday House. From the archives there, I used Eliza's and Caroline's letters and other personal writing to bring this story to light. This incredible family wouldn't let me go after 2 novels, so I traveled further back in time to the Civil War to tell the story of Caroline's great aunt and how she fought to be a nurse on the battlefields of the war for the North and to be part of the fight against slavery. That's how Sunflower Sisters was born. It's told from Georgiana Woolsey's point of view, and also from the points of view of 2 fictitious characters, Gemma, a young woman enslaved on a tobacco plantation, and Anne May, the mistress of that plantation. Many of the historical events in the book are drawn from the Woolsey family letters in the archives at Caroline's house. One letter, which described the sisters seeing a slave market in Charleston, a site that set them on their path to abolitionism, sent me to South Carolina to start my research journey to see the market they described, now a museum. Luckily, I lived in Atlanta at the time, near the Atlanta History Center, with an extensive collection of Civil War artifacts, where they shared their deep knowledge of everyday life during the war. I also visited former plantations, now museums, every chance I got, in the surrounding area. Since Sunflower Sisters is set in Maryland, a border state, Sauterley Plantation was especially inspiring, on the banks of the Patuxent River. A key part of Sunflower Sisters takes place in Gettysburg on the battlefield, so I spent a lot of time there, tracing the steps of the characters so I could write about the place as accurately as possible. My son, who I dedicated the book to, came with me on those trips and helped me document my research. Gettysburg is such an incredibly moving place, and it was helpful to visit the actual sites of scenes in the book. The field hospital where Georgie and her mother, Jane Eliza, actually nursed soldiers, Union and Confederate alike, to the train station where the wounded were sent off in cattle cars, to the hallowed ground where Gemma gets caught up in battle. Caroline Faraday was a staunch supporter of civil rights. I think she'd be happy to know that her abolitionist Woolsey ancestors' stories are being told. It's been bittersweet writing Sunflower Sisters, the last in a series of books about Caroline Faraday's incredible family. But whenever I miss these characters, I know where I can find them. In the pages of Lilac Girls, Lost Roses, and now Sunflower Sisters. And I hope you will too.
Hey.
Hi, Lisa.
I am so excited to talk to you about this book, but whenever I'm Zooming with somebody, it always, with an author friend, it always makes me think of the last time I saw that person or something quirky we've done together or whatever. So my quirky memory of you that came up right away was I'm in the parking lot of the Outback Steakhouse, and Random House had set up these Zoom things that we were doing, but it was back before the pandemic. So, I didn't hardly know anything much about Zoom, but book clubs could enter to win a Zoom meeting with various authors. And they gave us this special login. And so, I logged into it and I had done a book club and I didn't realize it was like a combined account. So I'm in the parking lot of the Outback Steakhouse randomly one day and my phone's making this weird ring. And I'm like, why is my phone making this weird sound? And I pick it up and it's like, this Zoom thing is calling me, this Zoom app. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I should answer, but I don't know why my phone is calling me on Zoom. And I answer it.
And it's me.
There. I'm like, who is this? It's Martha Hall Kelly. Martha Hall Kelly, what are you doing on my phone? She's like, who is this? It's Lisa Wingate. Are you the book club?
I felt so bad.
That was so funny. So that was the first thing that came to my mind was randomly talking to you in the parking lot of the Outback Steakhouse.
Well, this is much better than that.
Yes, this is so much better. So it is good to see you under much more controlled circumstances.
Yes.
Good to see you in the parking lot too, but this is so much better. So, and of course, now we all know all about Zoom, but back then it was a
oh yeah, now we're pros.
Now we're professional. So just a little random fun. I remember another thing I think of with you is you have an incredible she shed. I remember seeing photos of this incredible she shed where you wrote, and I want to know the dish on this she shed. Where did it come from? How did it come to be? Because it's like every woman's dream.
First of all, I love that you're using that phrase. That is so funny, the she shed. Well, our house on Martha's Vineyard had a gardener's kind of shed. And I just thought, wow, if I clean that out and paint the inside white, what would happen? And my husband said, go for it. Lilac Girls had, just kind of taken off. So I finally had some power in the relationship. And he was like, it's all yours, the gardener's shed. And so I just took it and made it mine. So I'm so glad that you like it and didn't think, oh, that's just like a redone gardener's shed. But that's so nice that you liked it.
I picture you sitting there with all these historical documents around you and a dip pen and an inkwell and a pad of paper. How does it really look? Is there a pet there? Is there a laptop? How's it really?
Pet. I have this really great old zinc table that I found at a flea market out in the field in Pennsylvania that I just love, and with an actual desktop. And I've tried to make it comfy. So people will come in and talk to me, but they never do. They're always off doing other stuff. It's only in summer that when we're there. So yeah, it's very private. But I am getting these like ants that are eating away at the foundation. So I don't know. I think someday my she shed's just gonna like come falling down, unfortunately. Then I'll have to build another one, a better she shed.
Make sure there are no muskrats in there when that happens.
I should rewrite that bio because it sounds like the muskrat and the beavers are they're my pets or something. They're in the pond.
Okay, so these are not Oliver's sleeping companions or anything.
No, they are not. Someone actually asked me early on. He said there was a woman that had a beaver for a pet, and it was in the bathtub. That's where it kind of lived, and it was bringing all the wood in the house into the bathtub to make a dam. And I just thought that is the saddest thing I've ever heard. That poor animal. Anyway, but mine are in the wild. Oh, thank God. We see them every once in a while. They get mad and they flap their tails. I didn't realize that's, what they do.
Well, I did not know that, but
see, we're learning about nature today.
We're learning. So, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about your just the process of your writing. My mother's my first beta reader, and then I have a little team of beta readers who are very honest with me, and so I go through. First rough draft is just for me telling the story to me finding the story. Second draft is me getting it ready for someone to read. It goes to my mother and the beta readers. How do you have beta readers who, what's that process look like for you?
It's so interesting to hear your process. Because I came to this kind of late in life, and I don't really know that many writers. I've never done any kind of a writing group or anything. So it's just fun to hear about your process. But mine is just, it's kind of evolved over the years. My husband has always been my first reader. And because when I was writing Lilac Girls, I thought, no one is going to want to read this. This is just my thing. I'm going to self-publish it maybe. And so he was nice enough, as you say, that first draft, you get it polished up before people even read it. But back then he was reading just early drafts and things. So I'm really lucky that he hung in there. And then my daughters, I have two daughters, one is 32 and one's 30, and they are my, I've added them to my early readers as well. And they all have different kind of styles. My husband's more, he was a history major in school and college. So he, he's a man, so he looks at it from kind of a different point of view, but he's a really good editor and, gives kind of the big picture things. Like with Lilac Girls, he said, you really should make Ravensbrück worse, because I would tell him the stories about how bad it was. And then, he didn't feel on the page it was as bad. So I went back and, made it worse. So, it's those kind of big notes that are really helpful. And then with my daughters, well, first of all, they always say, make it more weird, more kind of creepy and interesting, which is helpful. And things like in Sunflower Sisters, I had a lot of lint making in there. I was so fascinated with how they made lint, which, are the bandages. So they would go into their house and take all of their clothes and, their sheets from their beds, and they would scrape it into lint for bandages. And I just thought that was really interesting. And both of my daughters were like, Mom, too much lint, take out the lint. And so it's, it's those kind of, I don't know if you ever run into this as an author, that, you get into something that's kind of, you feel is interesting, but then other people think, some of the beta readers, does that ever happen to you?
Oh yeah, I used to have an editor way early on who would write in the margins, your research is showing.
I'm blushing just
Not in a good way.
About that.
Yeah.
Oh my God. But that's what you want, don't you think? You want someone to be honest.
No, well, you need that because, it's a honing process. of getting the book down to what it ends up to be. And one of the things that people always ask, well, people, always want to know how close is the final product to what I originally wrote? Did I write the historical and the contemporary story separately and thread them together or not? For me, I'm very linear. I start, so I'm in one, I write about a half a chapter a day. So I'm in the modern day character for 2 days, and then I'm in the historical character for 2 days. And, I wrote it in the order that people read it, other than what happened in editing as it went through the publishing house. But what about you? So how do you thread this together?
Same thing. I mean, do you want to see my outline?
Yeah.
Hold on. It's kind of big. When I first started writing Lilac Girls, it took me 10 years. I had never written a book before. And I think part of the reason why is because I kept writing things and having to throw it out. And then it dawned on me, I think I looked online, what writers do. And I realized, oh, you can do an outline. So I started doing these outlines. I don't know if you can see it. It's just like,
wow.
Like crazy. It's crazy. When I look at it now, I just go,
wow.
What that, like, I don't know. It's like when you look at a baby after you've had a baby and you go, that came out of me. Well, that's how I kind of feel about these outlines. It's like, I get crazy. But anyway, I feel like once I have those outlines and all the seams that I know they're all, and I know the end, some people are pantsers, but I just can't do it. And with historical fiction, I think, you're dealing with real events. So yeah, I write consecutively one Gemma chapter, one, same as it sounds like you do. Yeah, I get too confused otherwise, because the story is kind of unfolding as you're going and you're braiding it. And I just don't know how I could do it. I am, and we can probably talk about this later about coming books, but I am writing a book now that has 2 characters in it, and it's a little bit easier to do that. I can go ahead and write like a couple chapters, and then, but with 3 characters, it's harder.
Yeah, there are a lot of timelines of different people threaded through this book, which I loved. I loved the perspective of each one of these characters. I enjoyed the Woolsey sisters, because there was sort of a Little Women vibe to them, I thought.
Well, that's nice.
Reminded me of, and I mean, I enjoyed all the parts of the story, but I enjoyed just the interplay of them and their conversation and their spunkiness, and of course, all the history, because I had just written the Book of Lost Friends, so I had been in that time of history, but well, a little anyway, around the same time, but way south, the way down in Louisiana. So I didn't really study what was going on in the borderlands, how much that was different when you get up on the war borders, the borders between North and South. So I guess for you that was basically a function of because you were dealing with the Woolsey sisters, and that is where their Civil War history took place.
Yeah, you mean why those 2 extra characters of Gemma and Aunt May? Why did I set it?
The particularly interesting history of those areas that this is different from when you get way down into Confederate lands. It's different.
Definitely. And I needed them to, well, Georgie is Caroline Faraday from Lilac Girl's great aunt. And I needed them to be able to interact at some point, because the 3 characters had to come together. And so if they were geographically too far away, that wouldn't have been possible. Plus, I wanted to set it on in a border state. So because at the time, slavery in, say, New York had been outlawed, but not in the border states, because Lincoln was afraid that if he said, okay, no more slavery in Maryland, Maryland would go, oh, really? Okay, we're going to secede and we won't be a Union state anymore. So, and for the purposes of my story, I had to have someone that, that tension was there for the whole book. And, if it had been in a state where slavery no longer existed, there would be no more tension. So I needed that. And I ran into someone at a book signing who told me that her great great grandparents were enslaved at a place called Sauterley Plantation in Maryland. And I went down there and I thought this is the perfect setting. It was just, they have a cabin there still that they've beautifully preserved and is part of the tour where the enslaved people slept. And also the main house is absolutely beautiful. You know, the contrast of that is just so stark. So that's where I decided to set it. It's called Peeler Plantation in the book, but it's really Sauterley Plantation.
How did you find the historical characters, Anime and Gemma? Are they based on anyone or just?
You know, I read a book, a really wonderful book. I don't know if you ran into this in your research. It's Harriet Jacobs' Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl.
I did.
Oh my goodness, wasn't it so good? I mean, it reads like fiction, but it's her story.
Yeah.
It's just the most heartbreaking thing ever. And it's a great companion novel to both the Book of Lost Friends and Sunflower Sisters. It's about this woman, and it's from her point of view. She has a beautiful voice, and she was enslaved in North Carolina, and there was a man that she was owned by a young woman whose brother-in-law was a doctor, and he for some reason was in love with Harriet, or in lust more, because she's a very very beautiful woman, and he built a house in the woods where he wanted her to come and live and be kind of his concubine, and she just was so horrified by that she went to her aunt and said, hide me. And she did, in a coffin-sized room in her attic. And she would see her children go off to, you know, she had young children at the time, and she would see them every day, but they had been told that their mother had abandoned them. So that story just like grabbed me and didn't let me go. And so I kind of based LeBaron Carruthers, the terrible overseer in the book, on that doctor, just because I thought that was just, for any woman, the worst nightmare to not be able to get rid of someone like that. And also a little bit Gemma, because she can read and write in the book, as Harriet could. And the plantation mistress, Anne May, can't write. So she makes Gemma write some things for her, which gets Gemma into kind of some bad situations.
Yeah, that book, I learned so much from that book about, there are so many things history books are great, but when, I feel like when you do your research from a history book, you're still getting history filtered through the historian's eyes, because we all see things through our own experiences, our own eyes, our own lens of life, whatever time period we're writing, we're reading in or living in. And when you go back to original narratives, you lose that second filter. You're reading original narratives of the day. So when I was working on the Book of Lost Friends, Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, I spent a lot of time in the WPA slave narratives, just seeing when a WPA writer went out to interview these last survivors of slavery, and it says, tell me about a few of the significant incidents in your life. What were those? And it's just, you find things that you don't see anywhere in the history books, just strange little facts of everyday life. It's so many things when you look at real narratives, so many things are so much different than what we're taught in school or what we're taught in history, or there are all these things we're never taught about real life. And, some of the things that became even symbolic in the manuscript when I was writing came out of those real life narratives written down in the time period. So I kind of wondered about the sunflowers in your book, if that came from somewhere. It's obviously symbolic. Where does that symbol come from?
Yeah, I can't talk about it too much because it is a bit of a spoiler, because that is a little bit of a mystery in the book, the sunflowers. Well, with Lilac Girls, I had titled that The Rabbits of Ravensbrook. I'm the worst titler, obviously. And then Random House was the one that said, I lived in Atlanta at the time, and I said, oh no, I was complaining at lunch when we were all together and saying, I can't grow lilacs in Atlanta because they need a harsh winter in order to bloom. And my editor was just like, oh, let's call it Lilac Girls. And so I was like, oh no. And now, of course, I love it. But so we had that first flower. And then roses, I thought, well, the Tsar in Russia, roses seemed perfect. But it was tough coming up with the Civil War flower. And I would go out when I was doing the Lost Roses paperback tour, asking people, what do you think? What flower? And they would say, a daisy or black-eyed Susan. But then I found out that the sunflower had a really interesting meaning. It was a symbol in the Underground Railroad. And I hate to be a tease, but I think you just have to read the book to find out what that is. But I was really, really, once I saw that, I was like, it's going to be a sunflower for sure.
Oh, see that it's the perfect. Okay, I won't because I don't want to give any spoilers because the book is so new and people need to read it. And but it was one of those things in the story that caught my interest and then caught my imagination. And, I wondered where that came from. But
I was just reading and, researching, and I came across that and just thought, well, thank you, literary gods for handing me that. Sometimes that happens, don't you think? It's so nice.
Yeah. Oh, it's the best. It's the best. There were so many things when I was working that I came across like that. I thought that is exactly what I need, and sometimes it's funny because the stories come from research, they come from imagination, and then they come from life because sometimes I'll be stuck somewhere and I will drive to the store and a stray dog will cross the road and I'll think, oh, they need to pick up a stray dog and that will solve the problem, or
it's
whatever.
So weird. It's so strange, isn't it? But I love it when that happens.
Oh, it's the best. It's, that's part of the adventure is just discovering those little nuggets that fit into the story and that fit that puzzle. It's like that puzzle piece is out there and you didn't know it was out there, and then you come across it and you realize it just fits right in there.
Thank God. And you think if we didn't go to the store, I wouldn't have that dog. It's very strange.
Yeah, no, it's so what puzzle pieces did you run across that just really surprised you other than lint making, which we now know about?
I was only allowed to put lint making in like once, I think. Oh gosh, roller skates. They had these things called parlor skates, and Georgie wears those in the book, which was when I saw that they would skate around the house, I just thought that's so weird and perfect. Also, I don't know if you remember this in the book, but there was a cat carrier that Anne May uses that was all the rage in France. And they had these little, like what we think of as like what you take the cat to the vet in, like a little box that had a screen in it, but they would put it on their back, strap it like right above, like they didn't always wear bustles, but right above their hoop skirt, and like walk around with that. I thought that was very strange. Flower pot bonnets. I thought, in Sunflower Sisters, Gemma makes those, and she's very good with, I guess we would call it early recycling, and she makes what she calls trash bonnets. That's what's on the cover. And if you look at that bonnet, you can tell it's been made around a flower pot, and that's what they would do, not just enslaved people, but anybody. And they would weave a bonnet around a flower pot, take the flower pot out, and you have a bonnet. In Gemma's case, she reused a lot of, she sewed a lot of dresses for her mistress. So she would use kind of the remnants to make flowers to go on the bonnets, and they become quite a hit in the book. And she gets, to be well known for her trash bonnets. But so those are just some of the little things. Another thing I found when I was down in Atlanta, I went to a lot of former plantations around Atlanta because I was still writing my book before that, Lost Roses, but I was doing research, and I found that in one of the houses one of the window panes had been, a woman had written her name across the window pane. And I asked the docent, and she said, oh, back in those days, when you were given a diamond ring, the only way to test if it was not paste is to use it to write and etch it into glass. So women, when they got engaged, it became a thing, a tradition to write your name, Anne Mae Wilson Watson, into the glass to make sure that your ring was a real diamond. So I love just collecting, and it sounds like you do too, collecting what my editor calls hidden history, just those little things that you find in, I don't know if you read, some of the old Harper's magazines, or is it Godey's Ladies magazines? There's all sorts of good stuff in there.
Oh yeah, the newspaper ads and things, you can find out so much about what was going on during the day, and you just don't realize what normal life was like, and the normal things that went into everyday life. And then in some ways, how much life was like what life is still like today. You tend to think of those far removed, long ago people as, life was so completely different, and it was, but it wasn't. I mean, people are still people, and a lot of the things they do and did are still the things we do now.
Yeah, that was a real surprise to me, actually, because I read so many letters that are in the Faraday archives, written to and from all the different sisters. And I just thought this could be like emails today. And they're very kind of sarcastic and kind of mean sometimes, but funny. They're just like, it's like eavesdropping on someone's just today private conversation. So it's so funny that you found that too, that you felt like it could be today. It wasn't that archaic. And I thought it was going to be like, I thought there's vocabulary and speech patterns would be so kind of old fashioned, but they really weren't.
Yeah, some things don't change that much, I think. And what kicked off the Book of Lost Friends for me was a reader telling me about these lost friends ads that families used after formerly enslaved families used after the Civil War to try to find the families they'd been separated from during slavery. And it just kind of, I love these things that blow my mind. It just kind of blew my mind, because I thought, I've never thought about, after these people are free, what do they go on these searches to try to find their family. But it's the most natural thing in the world. And I saw also in Gemma, that is her big driving force. Did you know that was always going to be her driving force? How did you discover that about her?
I knew how it ended, but I didn't really know the details of that. Like her sister, and I knew she was a real family person, and her situation is unusual, I think, for an enslaved family, because so often they were sold off to all different places. And she has her mom and dad there, and she has her sister at the next plantation rented out, because she's, as they say, a cripple, and she has to work on the indigo plantation. But at least, she's just terrified that family unit is going to get broken up. And then, of course, I can't give it away, but, some bad things happen to her little family unit. But I feel like that kind of evolved as time went on, because I had to, these are all spoilers, but I had to send her to Gettysburg. So, there were some things that had to happen. And along the way, sadly, her family has to kind of disintegrate a little bit. But I didn't really plan that. I knew certain big things would happen. But, it wasn't all in that giant, that behemoth of an outline.
Massive outline. I'm impressed with that massive outline. You look so organized.
Oh, well, that is just, not true. But that's a desperate attempt to be organized. But yeah, it's hard.
You just made that up so you could show it off on Zoom.
It's just, The Shining, how he, what he's typing is all just gobbledygook. Yeah,
Right.
it's not real.
Those are your grocery lists.
Right, right.
Okay, last question, because I know we want to take a few from the chat. So you grew up in Massachusetts. My first grade teacher in Massachusetts, we had moved from Florida to Northborough, Massachusetts in the middle of the winter. So that was a big shock for little Sunshine, Florida kids, galoshes and snowsuits and all these things. But my first grade teacher told me I'd be a writer, and I just believed it from then on.
What?
Yeah. And
Isn't that amazing?
Northborough, Massachusetts. So when did you know you want to be a writer?
Oh gosh, my mom used to call me the writer in the family. I'm not quite sure why. And sadly, right before she passed away, she knew, she was very sick. She asked me to write her obituary because she said, well, you're the writer. And I was like, am I? Do I have to, Anyway, that's kind of a sad story. But yeah, she had always thought of me because when the other kids were going to regular camp, like camp where you swim and things, I always wanted to go to writing camp, which was so fun. But then I kind of, I don't know, grew out of it. I just didn't keep doing that. I became a copywriter and wrote commercials because my mom also said to me, you have to earn a living. You cannot move back in here. You have to go make a living. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I'll write commercials, I guess. I didn't even think about, I always thought like James Patterson type people write books. How do you even do that? I didn't know. So it wasn't until I had retired from advertising and I was in my 50s, I thought I was just retired, raising my kids. And then, that story just kind of tapped me on the shoulder. Sometimes I wonder if maybe Caroline Faraday, who had passed away by that point, when I walked into that house, just went, well, she's as good as anybody. Well, I'll take her. She's going to tell the story. I think I went to a psychic and they said that there was a tall woman doing this, clapping. And so I was like, I guess, yeah, Caroline's happy.
Well, I think that writer thing both is born in us and grows in us. My parents were not going to send me to college to be a writer. I was a technical writer because same thing, they didn't want me living in their basement. They wanted me to be employable and everything. And so we have that in common. I didn't do it for very long before I started, because I'm on book, I don't know, like 32 or something.
Oh, I'm so impressed. That's
my lifelong thing. I think it's the best thing really to have that practical experience too. I don't know about you, but that technical writing, what I learned as a technical writer is actually very useful in writing.
Is it really? Why is it useful?
You learn economy of language, you learn straightforward communication skills, same with writing ads, that can come in handy because a novel is a balance of showing and telling. It's a balance of detailing out the things that are dramatic and that matter, and then also being able to encapsulate time and move on. So, so they don't make lint 8 different times in the novel. Or sorry, I'm never going to let you live the lint making down now. But it is a balance of that. And I think you learn that from business writing. You learn how to really encapsulate an activity in a sentence or two, or a day, or, it rained all day and the next night we did this or whatever. So anyway, okay, we should see what somebody else wants to ask you, but this has been so fun.
I know we could go on forever. Yeah. I don't know if there are even any questions. Maybe
we have got some questions. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
no, it's fine.
Okay. So Sharon would like to know, Martha, can your books be read in reverse order, starting with Sunflower Sisters?
That's so funny.
Chronologically?
Yes, they can. Actually, when I wrote Lost Roses and went out on tour, a lot of people asked me, can they do it read Lost Roses and then go forward in time. And they were all saying they really liked doing that. I haven't spoken to anyone yet because the book just came out, but I bet that would be a really nice way to do it. And you'll see that I kind of left a trail of Easter eggs a little bit in there. Things like the Woolsey Silver are in Sunflower Sisters, and then you'll see all the way at the third book, Lilac Rose, the Woolsey Silver's in that too. And there are a few things along the way. So you kind of get to know the family and before you get to Lilac Rose, which I think might be kind of fun.
Yeah, I feel like that's so rewarding for those like really careful readers and kind of just like, the fan base. Lisa, this one is for you. It's a kind of a two-parter. Are you working on a new book right now? I'm guessing the answer is yes. And then Mary would like to know, how is Huckleberry?
I am working on a new book right now. Another piece of hidden history. I have learned never to say too much about that ahead of time, because when you're dealing with history, you never know when it's going to come into the public eye. For instance, I had the Pack Horse Librarians in my idea drawer from way back about 2014 when I wrote a book that had the federal writers in it. And in that book, I came across another WPA program, which was Depression era, which was the Pack Horse Librarians. So I was like, I want to write about them someday. And now look, everybody's written about the Pack Horse Librarians, so I'll never get to do it.
I feel like there cannot be enough books about Pack Horse Librarians, though.
Yeah,
so if you ever want to do it.
I learned you don't let those things out there. And Huckleberry is good. Huckleberry is, it's rainy today, and that has brought out a squirrel in the backyard. So he is on major squirrel patrol at the back window, doing the tremble in place maneuver in hopes that it will make the squirrel leave the yard.
And I suppose that this next one is, it could be for both of you. I would like both of you to answer, if you don't mind. Who is your favorite Woolsey Faraday?
Oh my goodness.
An easy question too, but if you had to choose.
If I had to choose, it would be of the sisters, it would be Mary. Mary was the middle daughter, and she was called the beauty of the family. I don't think we would say that anymore because we're way too PC these days to like call one child the beautiful one. But back in those days, they were like, yeah, she's the beautiful one. So she had 4 children, and nobody else during the Civil War, none of the other sisters had children yet. She had 4 daughters with her husband, Reverend Howland. And so she was just this incredibly busy woman. And she was a poet, and she painted as well, but she was a poet that wrote these unbelievable poems that I guess what we would say today is they went viral. And this one, Rainy Day at Camp, every soldier, North and South, had that Rainy Day at Camp in their pocket. But she was not allowed to say that she wrote them because she was a woman. And everyone assumed, since it was from the point of view of a soldier, a man, that it was written by a man. So it had to remain anonymous until she died. So I always felt like that was so unfair that Mary and she, like Winslow Homer painted a painting based on Rainy Day at Camp, but she could never say, oh, that was me. And so, and reading her actual letters in the archives, she was just such a lovely, she always was so caring for other people. So that's my vote, Mary.
Oh gosh, I did, now that you mentioned Mary, I did like her because she was a writer. But really, Georgie was, either because she was the main character or just because she's kind of such a rule breaker. She's just, what she's willing to do is so out of character for a woman of her time. And when I quoted, wrote an advanced quote for the book when I read it early, that was the first thing that kind of came to me, is she's such a woman ahead of her time. She's such a woman out of the box kind of for her time. And I loved that about her. And that seems to be a kind of a thread with the women of this family line. And I don't know if it's if it's DNA or what, but these are some kind of mold breaking, break the mold, kind of tough, independent women. And I love that about them. And I love that about Georgie.
Oh, that's so nice. And thank you for those quotes, by the way. I hope someday they ask me to do a quote for your books, because I would love to repay the favor. You write the most beautiful book quotes, but yeah, I agree with you about Georgie. Now that I hear you talking about Georgie, yeah, she was pretty amazing. I think it was their mom that kind of inspired that, because all the girls were kind of like that, but Georgie especially, yeah.
And I have just one more question. So you say you're kind of finished with this family, but do you think there's ever any, I mean, I could use so much work to kind of like bring these worlds to life, all this research and stuff. So do you think, is that why maybe you're kind of looking into like a more modern day thriller to kind of take that part of the work away and also kind of flex the muscles?
Yes. I've always wanted to just do something a little bit more contemporary, but 1950 is where the next novel is set. So it's not that contemporary, but compared to the Civil War, it's very contemporary. And it takes up where Lilac Girls left off. It doesn't have all the same characters, but it's about these two women that hunt down a Nazi doctor that did something terrible to them at Ravensbrück. They go around the world. But then the book after that is an actual contemporary thriller. So based in my own house. No muskrats, but very scary. My husband said, we're gonna have to move because I scare myself so badly writing about like our basement. It's hard to go down there now. So anyway, that's what's coming up.
That's so exciting. We've so much to look forward to. But in the meantime, we are so happy to have Sunflower Sisters, and this is kind of like a pandemic rarity. These are actually signed, no book plates. As much as we love book plates because we just want to make it work, it's really special to have like a signed first edition. So if you needed one more reason to buy the book, they're signed first editions. And I have linked it like 4 or 5 times in the chat, and I also linked to Lisa's latest book, The Book of Lost Friends. This has been so wonderful. And I think I want to thank our attendees too for asking such great questions in this.
So good.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this has been kind of like a little salon, a little historical fiction salon. And it's been, I don't know. It's a nice
I think that's because Lisa's amazing. Such great questions. Thank you so much, Lisa. And I hope I can return the favor someday.
Yes, absolutely. We'll talk again, and not from the parking lot of the Outback
with a blooming onion. Yes, that's great.
Oxford, Mississippi. We'll have to do this IRL.
Wouldn't that be so fun? Oh, I would love that. Yeah. Okay, it's a date.
Yeah,
wonderful.
The cat.
Yep, I'll bring Carla. She'll hate it, but if you want her there, I'll bring her. Yeah, this has been so great. Thank you all again for your time and your talents, and I hope everyone has a great evening. Y'all take care.
Bye.
Hard to end.
Thank you so much.
So fun.